I get called sexist, even though I'm a woman. I'm being sexist towards women just because I'm not liberal. I get that a lot, and I'm
Right.
like, that's just not right. I still want everybody to have their rights. I don't want it to get my own rights taken away. Trust me.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Two Average Joes. As you can see, there's three of us. Isabella has joined us, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we're looking a lot better. I find that we're going out of our way to make sure it's not just me and Robert.
Yeah.
We have to do what we got to do. There you go. Robert, how are you doing, my friend?
Good. In beautiful Michigan, and you're down in Mississippi. Isabella evidently is in Albany, New York. So we got not the four corners of the country covered, but she is a college student going to the University of Albany, I believe. And she's going to talk about being a conservative in a liberal university setting, I think.
She's going to talk insanity. That's what Isabella's going to talk. So, Isabella, go ahead, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Isabella. I go to the University of Albany. I'm a sophomore now, and things get really interesting over there. Honestly, it's very bad.
Give us your last name there because I'll butcher it. I did it one time.
It's Azzolino.
That's a great name. By the way, full disclosure, me and her are related. You can probably tell because we're both so attractive. Probably figured that out already because we are. But full disclosure, are related. She is going to talk a little bit about their crazy experiences being in school and just dealing with it. And there'll be a link down there for an article she wrote for Two Average Joes about not being liberal in the college setting. So she was going to talk about that. Give me, you had a really weird experience at another school before you went to Albany.
Yes, I went to the College of St. Rose, and that's also in Albany, literally right up the road from Albany. And most of it was online. And, so we didn't have as much person-to-person interaction because, COVID and everything. Everything was on a Zoom meeting. And things you could still feel the tension even though we weren't necessarily in the classroom. And I'll go into what it's like in the classroom. But I took an intro to mass media class, and there obviously is politics involved with that because most of our media is taken over by politics at this point. And no matter what we were talking about, somehow it became political. And things got really nasty. Even in a Zoom meeting, these kids would come for each other, start screaming, start yelling. And it got pretty bad. It was very heated.
I have found, and Robert, comment on this because you and I talk about this all the time when I was up in Michigan. We do. We're a little older than
A lot older than you.
we remembered when you just didn't get heated about it. We didn't discuss politics as much, but we didn't get as heated about it. And kind of give me your kind of remembrance on it not being like that.
Well, when we grew up, Vietnam was raging through our neighborhood, and I told Joe, body bags were coming back while we were in there, and there was the permeating through society. The society was against the war, and the liberals were. That's what Joe and I were talking about in the pre-show about how if they would have stopped it, maybe wouldn't have gotten to where we are now, but. Our parents were conservative, and I guess most people were conservative, I guess, who we ran around with. So there was nobody was in your face about what your politics were, not in school, of course, there wasn't a mass media and social media outlets either. So
here's one thing. I was watching a documentary on the 60s today, Jim Morrison, who I like very much. And I love the music. We should have stopped it. Right. You said that that one of the things is that it's actually almost, and kind of give me your opinion on this, almost very difficult, like what you're believing of being conservative is almost seen as being offensive all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I never had a problem with being offensive to like when it came to everything. I mean, I was a punk kid in high school. I knew being punk and alternative, that kind of thing doesn't normally go with being conservative. So I was disliked by both sides at the time because I was an enigma to them, apparently. But, you know, just even being in the middle isn't enough because you're siding with them. And I actually saw something online, had these little people, they were red and blue, except a political system. And, the blue side pushes another blue person down to the ground and a red person helps them up. And they're like, why are you siding with the enemy? But that literally sums it up. They get so in your face about everything. And even if you just slightly disagree or you think something should be, a little different, it's offensive. You're being racist. You're being sexist. I didn't know I could be sexist as a woman. I didn't know that was a thing until recently.
Right. First off, let me clarify something. The fact that you don't mind offending people is a genetic situation. It's a complete genetic thing. You can't help yourself. But, I find that interesting because I've seen that same meme, about pushing them down and then picking them up. It's like, oh, you're on set. I think that is one of the crazy things that would be tremendously different if me and Robert were your age. Okay. Was that you could literally get in the middle and ride right down. And you're right. I don't think you can do that anymore.
It's not enough.
No, you almost, I really hate to say this. Do you find that there's almost a dogma to it? Almost like what would have been in the past would have been kind of like a religious dogma. Like, you have to believe this to be part of this group.
Yeah, honestly, because, I agree with some things on both sides. And I think most people do. I don't think I've ever met a person that literally believed everything of a conservative agenda or everything of a liberal agenda. But I mean, even at work, girls get into arguments about abortion and we're all women. And,
right.
Half of us are kind of like, yeah, that's not my thing. And then other people are like, yeah, kill all the babies.
Yeah, that's the truth. You know what's weird about that, though? And I'm going to tell you something because we're going to pick on that topic for a second. That would have been one that would have been left off the table.
Right.
Working school. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
I was in a couple of classes where they broached it, and it was like everybody handled that with kid gloves. Okay. And now I'm reading stuff, and it's like, wow, we're just there, and we're on it, and we're, I actually think race is there too, where I felt like people were very sensitive not to be too far to the left or the right, because I think we were all trying to pull together. And Robert, you can address that because that's one of your topics that you're disappointing with, is that we don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And now I almost like, wow, nobody wants to go there. It's like they almost want us to be at each other's throat. And I know that for you, Robert, that's a big deal because that you bring that when we first started this, you brought that up, that you felt that some divisiveness was there on purpose.
It is, and we've talked about it in a couple of different shows, and you probably feel it on the university campus that they're dividing us over things that we're not divided on. That racism, though Joe and I, we grew up in Virginia in the 60s, okay, so and 70s. So there were whites only drinking fountains when we grew up downtown Newport News. And, we've come a long way, and we've become enlightened in a good way, not in a bad way. And Joe, when he was on the police force, they're more diverse than they've ever been,
Yeah.
and all of the media, and it's all of the media have beat up the police now where they're not respected, and so we're approaching anarchy is what it seems like if we're not there already. And I don't know how you feel about that on your college campuses, the two that you were on.
Yeah, I mean, ACAB, I'm sure you've heard that phrase a million times. All these girls and men have pins that just say, ACAB, no police. They have the same with the profanity 12, they don't want anything to do with them. And we have university police because we have a very large campus, and then we have a lot of, off-campus apartments and such. And God forbid something happens to somebody, the cops show up and they don't want the cops there. Someone could literally be dying and they don't want anyone's help. Right. And it's gotten so bad that they're even against, the fire department and the EMS, like all the ambulances and everything, they're all associated with the same, first responder kind of thing. So they want nothing to do with them. And that's not everybody, but the loud minority at this point is that they don't want anything to do with it.
Well, that would have been nobody. Okay.
Right.
How small they are, right? One of the interesting things is when I was in Virginia the last time, I was teaching at the academy. And I'm just looking over 3 or 4 different classes that were regional. And I'm like, this is the most educated, most diverse, most well-rounded group of people we ever had doing law enforcement. It's everything everybody dreamed about back in the 80s, that we'd have just this, a much more representative kind of group of police officers. And it accomplished nothing because they still hate them. Yeah. You're just sitting there and you go, I'm looking. I mean, I was there when there was 2 types of people that did police work, especially in the area I was from Virginia, and it was men, and we had white men and black men. Okay, that was it. That was pretty much a police department back then. You had a few females. There were still police departments that didn't have females. Okay, and we were just getting into trying to get people that had college educations. The average police officer was still a high school graduate. And we're working to, and everybody realized, we need to be better. I mean, this is 1980s. This is in 2020. Okay. Everybody understood we needed to get better and get more educated, get a bigger group of people, get a more diverse group of people. And we did it. And it's still not good enough. It's interesting. And you know what? I'm going to say, you said something. I want you to expound on it because I hadn't thought of it, though the moment you said it, it made all the sense in the world. The fact that it somehow became all the first responders, the fire department and the EMTs.
That's insane. That's insane.
Surprised me, but I guess and you can answer this. I guess the perception is that everybody's working. They don't have people's best interests at heart.
Yeah, I don't know how it got there because I never really heard anything bad about, ambulance drivers and, firefighters. But I think since they do often all work together, especially if there's a major accident or fire or something like that, they're all together and they all get along. That doesn't mean, the one racist cop that could be on the Albany police squad doesn't mean that, they all support him. They just all work together. They all get along. That's what you have to do as adults.
Yeah, the first responders are all, it was interesting because I hadn't thought of that before. But it made all the sense in the world. The second she said it, I said, because the problem with first responders we're like a family. Okay, the police and the fire got to fight. And then, we got something to say about the EMTs and they got something to say about us, right? But it's like a little family, going at it. But, the second she said it, I thought that. I said, yeah, I could see them. Not that I agree with them, going, oh, well, they're all just in this together, which is, not true. But I mean, you really do see how far this could go. Because I mean, look, you need the fire department and the EMTs too. Okay, just pointing it out. What do you think with it doesn't matter which school you're on, and it is interesting. I want to back up on something and say, being on online classes on Zoom and stuff, that doesn't make any difference. As a matter of fact, I think that emboldens people because they become keyboard warriors. Mm-hmm. So you got that. But how do you think that the leaders of the school, the administrators, the people that, are making their money off being administrators there, when they don't address this, what do you think the end game's going to be?
Probably saving their income and covering their butts.
Yeah. I just,
if they get bad press from something happening, let's say they don't handle something right, people aren't going to want to go there.
Right.
It will ruin them. They'll ruin their reputation and everything.
Yeah, it's weird to have that because I think one thing, and I'm not saying for all the people that love colleges, and I'm all right with college. Like I'm not trying to put them down, but if they had ever been guilty of anything or accused of anything, it was underreporting. It's never been overreporting. Nowhere on this planet can you find an article. They say, you know, the problem with these colleges, they're overreporting. Okay?
Right.
It's always been underreporting. And it would seem like this is kind of a slippery, kind of dangerous situation to get into if you're an administrator.
Yeah, definitely.
Because they've never, look, trust me, they've never been guilty of overreporting.
Never.
Even a college professor, right? Because in your article, you said that there was a black college professor in that Harlem class that was trying to steer it in the right direction, but it kept going off the rails into the BLM stuff. Is that true? Is that what happened?
Oh yeah, he does everything he can. He's a wonderful professor, extremely well educated. He definitely knows what he's talking about. And what he's trying to explain to these kids is that, you know, we're not having another Harlem Renaissance for the Black community. That's not what this is. This is something pushed out by the media. He just wants to teach what happened in the Harlem Renaissance. And I think that's something we should all learn about one way or another. It's definitely very interesting. I mean, all the writing and all the music, all this poetry, everything that's come out of there is incredible. But, you know, that was 1920s. We're in 2020 now. This is 100 years later. They couldn't have imagined what would come of anything they've done. And now all their work is being used to push a completely different agenda that I could imagine a couple of them would not want anything to do with.
Yeah. I can even go back and think about even on just in my time dealing in the 70s and the 80s, where I felt like it was very important that we were all trying to come together, and it was going that way in the 90s and all. And it's like watching that not be anymore is very difficult for me because, you know, you said something and I want to emphasize it because I do believe most people believe this. Most people really just want to be left alone. They want to live their lives. They're really not on any side, but you're making people pick sides. And Isabella, I think that that's one of the things that I think, you know, you being young, but still being very, very smart about is that, yeah, you're having to pick a side. You cannot be neutral.
You can't. It's just not possible. Like, I think I mentioned it in my article. When I was at work during the election, the 2020 election, I was just kind of indifferent. Everybody was talking about it. And at this point, I just, you know, want to be able to pay my bills, be able to afford gas. Like, I'm asking for very little here.
That's right.
And one girl was just like, oh, who are you voting for? And I'm just like, back when my parents were younger, that you don't ask people that.
Ask that question. No,
I don't know why that's ever became okay again, because that's something you choose. That's your beliefs. You don't have to share them with anyone if you don't want to. And I'm just like, I don't know. I don't even know if I'm going to go at this point.
Right.
And she's like, well, what side are you on? Or she said something along those lines of like, oh, are you Republican, Democrat? And I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know where I fall at this point. And she's like, well, not in my mind, you're Republican. But she was joking at the time, but people genuinely think like that.
Yeah, they do. No, I agree. I don't think you can run that. And I feel bad for people because sometimes when I'm, you know, we talking now, or I read your article or some things we've said while we've been on Messenger, you know, just talking. And I'm like, you know, that's kind of a tragedy that you just can't say, I don't know. But I will tell you, your parents are right. There was a time you did not ask that question.
Yeah.
You know, you just didn't ask that question. And now that's almost like people want to know what you believe, like that's some sort of litmus test from whether or not you're a good person or not.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm old enough to remember, like, dude, you just don't ask that question. That's just not something that you do. You know, and Robert, you know, going back, you think about when we were at school, we're going to have an old man moment.
Oh, shit.
Trust me, I'm going to give it, Robert, at any time during our youth, anybody care what your politics were?
No.
No, we were at a different level. I'm not saying it's right.
Whole different animal back then.
Different level.
Well, they weren't vilifying people for their beliefs. And this is where, you know, they're destroying. And Joe and I, when we first started this podcast beforehand, we were going to try to get some people on the other side on and have an intelligent debate. And we're like, well, we're going to shit can that right out of the box. Because we had talked about it, because we're like, can't we get somebody on that we trust that's a liberal and we could honestly debate an idea? And that's what college campuses are supposed to be about.
Yes.
They used to be, they brought, when I was going to Christopher Newport College in Newport News, they brought in some Sandinistas from El Salvador. That's how they were. And they let them talk. They didn't scream them down. They didn't say, hey, you commie bastards, you can't speak. They didn't say you're communist and all this other stuff. They were on my college campus in Newport News, Virginia. And that can't happen, because now if you're a conservative, you're a terrorist just about.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that, Isabella?
You're entirely right, honestly. I know some schools had debate teams. I know my high school did. And I was too scared to join that because, one, right. I don't really like arguing. If people start yelling at me, I most likely will cry, even if I'm right. But it's a screaming match now. Nobody can have an intelligent conversation. I mean, even just yesterday, my grandmother and my great uncle on my dad's side were, talking politics in the kitchen, and me and my dad are sitting there and his wife's sitting there. And we're just like beyond ourselves because they were screaming and they're even on the same side. They believe very similar things, yet they were still screaming at each other. It just gets very loud.
Well, that's Italian food, right? Anyway, right?
Yeah, but, it's the same thing, even if, let's say if I did try to talk about something like this with someone at work, it would become a screaming match, without a doubt in my mind.
No, it's weird. I can go back to, we were at Minchville 100 years ago, and they are one of the few days I was actually in attendance at school. This is a rare day. But they had all the city council people come in because, in the seniors, we were all turning 18. And one of the guys that was running was a communist. I mean, he actually said, I'm a communist, right? Yeah,
there used to be one on the ballots almost every time.
Yeah, there was because there was we had a shipyard, and some of the union people who ran were actually communists. And said
they were,
right?
Carrying.
And of course, being young and dumb, we had to go talk to the communists because, he's the most interesting person, right?
Right.
And
he never won anything, right? But
I think he got one vote, but I apologized later for voting for him. I was young, right? So we were sitting there, we were talking to him, but at no point would anybody have yelled and screamed anybody down.
Yeah.
And I think now, the communists would be okay, but the Republicans or the conservatives would get screamed down.
And Isabella, you said in your article that there's some group that you were thinking about joining, but you are reticent to do it because you'll be labeled or tagged and it's going to hurt you resume-wise. It's going to hurt you. So, I mean, that's a suppression of your, beliefs. I mean, you're supposed to be, this is where Joe is going to jump on me now because I'm going to say the D word. Every time we say democracy, we think, the government should give you a bottle of Astroglide, but
yeah, that's a whole other episode. Go ahead.
Yeah, Turning Point USA, it's a lot of young conservatives and, some libertarians often join the group too. And we have a chapter on our campus and there's good amount of kids in there. I was quite surprised, male and female.
Yeah.
Good sized group. But from what I've heard, even from people who aren't into politics, they're like, those kids get labeled. The professors come after them. If they find out you're part of this, you will get called out all the time. You're basically getting harassed at that point.
Gotcha.
And, before anybody that's listening is going, well, you got to stand up for yourself. I agree with you. But sometimes you're in your college, you just try to get an education.
Well, and set yourself up for life, for success in life, actually.
Yeah, I mean, there's time and place for everything, and I think when you get older, me and Robert, we can fight the good fight a little bit more.
Yeah.
But no, I agree with you. I think it's interesting about that is, I think that, and this is why we need you to keep writing, and you'll be back on the show and everything. Is people need to understand this is happening. This isn't make believe. This is real deal stuff. Yeah. There was the things when it first started happening where conservatives were showing up and people were going crazy. anybody that believed in anything intellectual should have been upset. And I'm questioning that.
Yeah.
I don't think they are intellectual, and I don't think they belong to democracy, and I don't think they believe in open thought.
Well, we're steps away from burning books, I believe.
We're burning books. It's called Censorship on the YouTube.
That is true. You're exactly right. You're exactly right.
In our books every week.
Right. Because we try not to say the Nazi word or the commun or Germany or whatever, but we go, we're not there yet, but we are sure getting closer by not baby steps, by bigger steps, because we are being censored. You know, even if you don't agree with a liberal, I still want to hear what they say because they might have something smart to tell me. Okay. But when they start yelling over what I'm trying to tell them, then, you know, you lose. Then it's just a monologue. It's not a dialogue. So,
and here's we had the Secretary of State of Alabama on, and he was wonderful. John was.
Oh man, he was great. Yeah.
Absolutely uncontroversial. Just talking about what they're doing to help voters, to be fair.
Yeah.
We got nicked in the butt. Right from the beginning, buddy.
Yeah.
We couldn't get any support to promote that. We were rejected by.
It was too controversial because it's too conservative, I think. And it was because we named it. What we name it, Joe? Voter integrity.
Voter integrity, which is apparently an awful thing. It's a very awful thing to have voter integrity.
Yeah.
Very controversial.
Very controversial.
You know, you want voter integrity.
No.
Probably a horrible person. That's what we're fighting. But you know, here's the kind of scary part about it is, and this is why it's good to have this, because if one person says it, or in this case, me and Robert are one entity, Two Average Joes, and they go, oh, they're just blaming it on that. But when you have other people going, it's happening on colleges.
Yeah.
You know, we have people telling us that, you know, they can't get any traction on doing anything, you know, and you know, and sharing their ideas. Then it lets you know that that's real. So that is crazy. But let me ask you this one last thing, because you got a couple more years in school. How fast do you think this? Because I'm not going to ask you, do you think it's going to get worse? Because we already know the answer. To waste time. How fast do you think it's going to go in the next 2 years? If you were going to pick worst case scenario, what could you see?
I really think it all depends on how many people can become aware of what's going on, because I don't think some of these kids really do see that all the Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, just the news in general, they're all pushing the same agenda.
Right.
And I don't think they realize that, because for most of them, that's what they want to hear.
Yes.
And for people like me, you know, I can, you know, pick it apart and realize, like, hey, this isn't even what happened.
Right.
I think a good example of that was apparently on the border, there was some man on a horse and he was whipping people that were like crossing the border. Turns out that whole thing wasn't even true.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And people believed it. They didn't question it. They said, oh, I saw it on Instagram. Oh, I saw it on the news. This happened.
Right.
And then when they found out that that didn't happen, like it finally, you know, made its way around.
Right.
That woke up a lot of people. Woke up a couple of my friends. They're like, oh my God, this is getting really bad. And I'm like, dude, it's been bad.
Yeah, it's been bad. You know, the whole Joe Rogan thing was the same way, where all of a sudden, you know, Joe Rogan, by the way, is not a conservative.
No, he's not conservative at all. Well, maybe a little.
I heard somebody one time trying to make it sound like he was a conservative, and it's just because you don't listen to his show.
Yeah.
He's not a conservative. And when he realized that they were lying to him about the medicine he was taking.
Yeah.
Okay. And that supposedly, you know, he was out there taking horse medicine and all that stuff. He said, this is prescribed to me from a doctor.
Yeah.
You know, all of a sudden, you know, even he woke up to perhaps you know, might have wanted to pay some attention.
He had the CNN guy grouped on there, whatever the hell the doctor's name is. He brutalized him about lying about that.
Yeah.
That he was taking horse tranquilizers or whatever the hell it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, does that hit the campus at all? The Joe Rogan stuff, or?
Oh yeah, people talk about Joe Rogan all the time. He's kind of been memed amongst the internet. He's kind of a joke. But if you actually
Really?
sit down and listen to him, it's not that bad. I've took the time to listen to him. He has a
Yeah,
lot of amazing points.
no doubt about that.
Most time he knows what he's talking about.
And he's
Sometimes
an intelligent guy for being a MMA guy, and
exactly.
By the way, I would let everybody make fun of me if I was making the money here.
yeah,
Oh,
$50 million gives you
Paying me to death. Just pay me.
right.
I notified Spotify and let them know we'd do it for a tenth of what he was doing.
There we go.
Got another question to ask you, Isabella. This is a good one. Because I'm not on the college campus anymore, obviously. I could go, but I don't want to. Got all the education. What do you think the balance is? Because we know it's not 50-50 between conservatives and liberals. What do you think the balance is basically on a campus?
I mean, people wise, it probably is closer to 50-50 than you'd want to believe. Like
Right. Or led to believe.
Yeah. But, it really seems more like 90-10, maybe, less than that at this point. But I mean, anyone who thinks outside the, main liberal agenda block, they don't talk unless they're in that Turning Point USA group where they can talk and, they're not getting screamed at most of the time, I'd imagine. But,
Right.
They have their own time to meet and, it's just them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only time I think they can, actually speak their mind and, feel comfortable. But I really do think it's closer to 50-50 than it looks.
Yeah.
They called the conservatives the silent majority anyways.
Right.
So I think there's more out there. And I think there's a lot more females out there because, most females are typically very liberal. But I found a couple people that aren't.
Right.
There's a woman out there.
I worry about this from the female perspective. I wonder how many females, and you can address this one from the female perspective. There's probably more conservative females out there, but I think they're more likely to get beat down than if it's just a guy. Like if Robert and me, and you saw us, and you go, no, before we even talked to go, I bet you they're conservative. And as much as that might be stereotypical and also correct, okay, it allows me a lot of leadway because I'm not claiming that I'm anything other than I am. Nor is there a level of expectation that I'm anything other than I am. Okay? But I wonder about that with females a lot of times, since the perception is, especially if they're young, they're going to be very, very low.
Yeah. I get called sexist, even though I'm a woman. I'm being sexist towards women just because I'm not liberal. I get that a lot. And I'm like, that's just not right. I still want everybody to have their rights. I don't want to get my own rights taken away. Trust me.
Right.
But yeah, everyone just expects. I mean, especially in high school, the way I dressed, they just were assuming I was very, very liberal.
Right.
And then, throw the curveball, and then the conservatives are like, oh, we don't want her either.
Yeah.
Look like that, so we don't want her. But yeah, I have a group of friends, and they are all female conservatives, and they experience the same things as me. They're called racist. They're called sexist. They don't hold back. They don't discriminate with how they, treat you.
Right.
You get the same name calling, same stuff, just different gender.
Yeah. I think that sometimes people do make that mistake. They'll go, well, I'm a good person. I agree with the most of it. And then, they're like, there's 10 things they want you to believe. And you believe 8 of them. Then you get to the 9th one and you don't agree and you're a horrible name, Yep. And I find this with men too. So this is a not gender situation. This is men too. That if they're remotely liberal, and they're remotely, they feel like they're compassionate. They think everybody's going to be on their side right before they put their foot on their throat because you didn't agree with the 9th thing. You didn't agree with the 9th platform. It's like, dude, I've been telling you, it's intolerance. It's not disagreeing with you. Right. I can get into a room full of people who are as conservative as me, and we're not going to agree on everything. I agree with what you said earlier in the show where you go, I'm not going to find anybody that's 100% going to be whatever a conservative is that's going to agree with all of it. I think a lot of people, even though this term has kind of took a beating, they're kind of libertarian about things. They're not lining up with everything, but both of the people that fall in this category understand you have to get all 10 agenda items. And if you go off the track for number 9, they're going to eat you alive. Be mature. I think, Robert, you've seen that with just dealing with people where, people who you think would be sensible, just okay for people going to jail for civic violation.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I run into it. I'm a lawyer in, Southwest Michigan, pretty conservative area. But there are several liberals, and, I try to talk to them, because like I said, they might have something smart to say if I could talk to them. And because I don't fit, I have one guy who's a good friend of mine, actually, and he's quasi-conservative, married to a very liberal woman. Joe and I ate over at their house, and, because I hadn't gotten the vax for different reasons, he wanted to shun me, because he's like, you're risking everybody's life because you're not gotten the vax. And I'm like, well, wait a minute now. The vax doesn't prevent you from catching COVID, doesn't prevent you from spreading COVID, So is it even a vax? All right, just saying that part of it. But I had health issues, reasons why I didn't want to take it or whatever. And so a really good friend of mine and his wife is a really good friend of mine too. They were both beating me. Well, he was anyway, beating me up because of my stance on, the vaccine or whatever. And do you have that running your campus too?
Oh yeah. Without a doubt. Yeah, we had to mandate. The New York State school system, said we had to get it. But right. I found out that, I could have just done the COVID testing the entire time.
Right.
I was kind of upset about because they didn't really mention that in the email. They might have, but it's probably small print at the very bottom.
There you go.
But I ended up getting it, and so whatever. I mean, I knew I was eventually going to have to get it one way or another, whether it was work or school. And people, even in the group chat that I have for my school, all of us transfer students from different schools coming to UAlbany. A lot of them didn't want to get it. And I thought that was interesting. And this is all females, and, they're all relatively liberal compared to me anyway. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, they didn't want to get the vaccine. And I'm like, oh, that's, surprising. And I even had that at work. There was a couple girls that are like, I don't trust that. And I'm like, you have every right not to trust that. And
what happened to my body, my choice for the abortion side of it? That doesn't cross over. I don't get the logic myself. But.
Literally, it was surprising to see that. But then, one girl had, a police flag with the blue line on her wall. And those same people that were questioning the vaccine decided to, jump all over that. And I was like, oh, but we all just agreed on something here. Why can't we just keep it like that?
The ninth platform.
There we go. There we go.
You can find one. That's where I think that I'm not really interested in everybody yakking about them. We need to, just work with everybody. I want to work with everybody, but I'm not an idiot. I know I can get 8 things done out of 10. And if the 9th one goes bad, they're just going to get crazy. It's interesting because, one of the things I find interesting with liberals is that they're constantly talking crazy stuff about we're being suppressed. The only people I see suppressing anybody now is you.
Yeah.
Exactly. You are the greatest oppressors I have ever seen in my life. Yeah. And I'm probably not going to get to number 9 before we disagree. It's probably going to start.
It might hit 1 or 2, right?
Yeah, if we can find one we're in agreement on, we may want to start off with that one before it goes downhill. But let me ask you this one, because I do want to finish up on this, because I think out of everything that we've asked, I think this is the most important. You got a couple more years in school. How do people that are facing what you do, how do you kind of survive that? What do you see as a kind of your survival mode?
Well, it's very exhausting. I'll say that much. But honestly, I just speak when spoken to. I can't remember who told me that when I was a kid, but
Yeah.
just speak when spoken to. And so I don't join in, even in that class, my English class on the Harlem Renaissance. I don't say anything in that class. I'm white. What do I know? Apparently.
Yeah.
So, unless I'm asked, I don't say anything. And that's been getting me by so far. I mean, my high school was so much more different than college because we were very 50-50 in there. We had a lot of, liberal arts students in that high school. And then we had a lot of, men that wished they lived in the South and drove lifted pickup trucks. So, we had that there, but it wasn't nearly as violent as college.
Yeah.
So
let me tell you this for people that don't know, because I've never been to Albany, but I do understand that it is not like New York City.
Oh, God, no. It's very different. I mean, there's some similarities. I mean, even the setup of Albany itself is a tiny New York City, even tinier than New York City already is.
Yeah.
But we have a very diverse group of people up here. We have a lot of Middle Eastern people. We have a lot of Black people. We have lots of Hispanic. We have a little bit of everybody up here. And that was a big wake up call from my tiny small town where we had 2 Puerto Rican families and 1 Asian family.
Yeah.
But, it's similar to New York City in the sense that it's liberal.
Right.
But I would say compared to New York City, people are a little more open-minded up here than people in the city.
I think that a lot of times, because I know people who are from New York State, not to be confused with New York City. Mm-hmm. And there's actually a rural sensibility, like you said.
Oh, yeah.
There's a rural sensibility with some people. And I mean, I think people forget that. But it's interesting. And I'm going to say something because I'm sure there's somebody that's going to hear it and say, well, you should speak up, and be honest with you. I have found that picking and choosing your battles is very, very important.
Yeah.
And I don't think that warring for warring's sake is necessarily something that everybody should do. And, I think there's a tendency, and I know Robert still, I'm not at the police department anymore, so I have a different atmosphere happening. Robert has his law office and you're in school. I'm not sure, we're sitting on here and I'm on the police department and we're doing things. I mean, you are trying to navigate the waters and that's respectful. Okay. I mean, I always thought that one of the things that hurt some people in their career in the police department, and it wasn't on anything controversial, is that sometimes they just had to give their opinion when their opinion wasn't asked for. Okay. And I'm not talking about anything controversial. And you could ask them where to put the water fountain and turn it into a riot. Okay. I think that there is something to be said that we have to learn how to pick our battles and not bury ourselves. And I've always kind of believed that. Now I'm getting at the age, and because of where I'm at, I can be a little bit more outspoken on what I want. But I'm not going to go tell somebody who's going to get fired. You ought to tell them what you think. Oh, really? Just unless they're just infringing on you completely, navigate the waters. I think that I don't care if you're in the first grade or you're at 20 years at your job. We all learn to avoid people because they're difficult to deal with. First graders know that. They only think about when you're in first grade, like, that person's crazy. I'm not going around it, So you have to do it. I think there is something to be said about that. I think it is okay to navigate the waters. Each situation's different. I would feel right now that if you were on a police department right now, that you would have to feel very, very stifled, that you just almost can't win for losing, and that you almost can't take it next level to say anything. Because if you say the wrong thing and you're a public servant, you could get beat up, and I don't know if do you climb out of it. I don't know. So as I said, you're not going to hear me make gigantic judgments on what you should or shouldn't do.
There was a female commandant of the Michigan State Police, and she was removed from office because she posted a meme about Colin Kaepernick taking a knee at a football game. Okay, so I see where you would be very careful in what you say and do, because one, the ubiquity of social media and phones and recording devices everywhere, and the cancel culture being the way that it is, you are very young. So, luckily there weren't any of that when Joe and I were growing up, because we would have been canceled long ago, right? I mean, we still may shoot stuff we did in high school would make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. But
I would do it all again. Everyone else.
We probably are still doing it, right?
So let me stop you right there. Anybody? I want to find something Jay St. John did in high school. Let me clarify. I do it again. There you go. That was my.
So anyway, Isabella, about the cancel culture in college, I totally understand, but see, you as a woman, you're going to have to navigate this, and you're going to have to grow up during this crazy time that our politics, the fiber of our total nation, when Joe and I say it almost every show, is being ripped apart. To what end, I don't know. But so, being a conservative Christian white person is almost like a pariah now.
It's incredible how that went from being the norm to the worst thing you can be.
We're an endangered species, I think.
I think so, honestly.
I like what you said. Go ahead.
I mean, I like the idea of, a nuclear family, white picket fence, Christian family, all in your house, golden retriever dog, nice things like that. And now, God forbid you ever want to do that. And, my generation, grew up, the Twin Towers came down. We have all of these terrorist attacks. We have school shootings left and right. We're used to that kind of thing. And I think that desensitized us so badly that we don't even see what's going on now, because we grew up watching, I was born after the Twin Towers, but there's a couple people in my generation who, were two when it happened.
Right.
But, that's how our whole lives were set up. My mom was pregnant for me, and she said that someone said to her, "Why would you want to bring a child into a world like this?" And that stuck with me after she told me that, because now I can see what that person was saying. Look at everything that's happened in the past 19 years that I've been alive.
No. One thing that's interesting, I think people forget it, because I taught when I was in Virginia, and I taught for a couple of years, and none of them were alive for 9/11.
Right.
And when you get certain, you'll find this out. When you get to a certain age, you're like, "Oh, that was yesterday." No, that was 20 years ago. A lot of people weren't even born. I will tell you something too, and I don't want to get lost on this, but it's a good thing, and you brought it up, about the perception of being desensitized and the whole school shooting thing. And as somebody in law enforcement, I was very, very interested in that and did a lot of classes on that. I think that changed a lot of people's view about a lot of things. A fight when me and Robert were growing up, when somebody got off the bus, was a huge deal.
Yeah.
And most of the fights are just people pushing each other, because it wasn't even really a good brawl, right?
Well, and shotguns used to be brought to show and tell, right?
Yeah. Well, people used to carry them in their backs, because they have to go hunting later.
Gun rack in the back of
Gun rack in the back. Yeah. It just changed everything. I do think that both of those situations and a few other things really pushed us off. It really pushed us off the mainstream. And I really will say, this is something we can revisit over and over and over again. A lot that is considered extreme was actually normal 20 years ago.
Yeah, big time.
Just normal. I was like, "You're a horrible person to believe that." No.
And we lose sight, because of the media, of the good things that are happening. I mean, medicine, science, the real science, not the bullshit science.
Yeah, real science.
We're moving in miraculous places. I mean, Elon Musk, we did a show on it that nobody ever evidently will see. We said all these good things are happening in the world, so we can't do a good show.
Yeah, no one wants to hear that.
Right. But
he said good news.
Nobody watches it. But we have, driverless cars are really close. Robotics is really close. When we grew up, it would take a city block to have the technology to be able to do what a cell phone does. We're going to the moon. They're going to Mars. Civilians are in space. You just list off all the great stuff that is occurring in our world. But what we're having is, you can't be free on your campus to say what the hell you want to say. And there's nothing wrong with what you're saying. There's nothing subversive about it. There's nothing, wrong about it. There's nothing racist, sexist, anything about that. but they're going to label you just because you say you're conservative or you don't believe in the narrative of the ninth platform or maybe 8 of their platforms. But anyway, that was all I wanted to end on that.
Yeah, it's crazy. Isabella, you have been wonderful.
Thank you for having me on here. This is great.
We're going to do it again. I need you to come on again. I need you to write.
I will.
I want to emphasize something about the education and information aspect of it. I do think that there is always a group of people that just don't realize this is happening. It's like there's a video out there where they actually show all these news people telling the same story from all these different news stations, and they're all saying the same thing. Look, you need to know that, and I know people want to get into conspiracy. Like, that's not conspiracy. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
I mean, the truth is basically in many cases dead, Yeah. And that's a tragedy, but we need you to come back. I thank you very, very much.
Greatly appreciate it.
So excellent today. So without any further ado, Robert, anything else?
No, I think, we got an election coming up relatively soon. Michigan is on fire, that. And I don't know how Mississippi's doing, but
we stay on fire.
We stay on fire. Mississippi burning, right?
Like we don't even go any there. We're gonna let that.
Right. There we go.
Isabella, anything else you want to say?
No, New York's on fire too. But it is what it is.
There we go.
People not noticing is those people who refuse to see. God,
and the ones with the lighters that are lighting it on fire.
Yeah, there they are. Look, we appreciate you being here, and we'll see everybody next time. We thank everybody and hope to see you again.